All right. Thank you very much for joining us on the Voice of Job Seekers. Once again, I'm back. Thank you very much for joining me. If you want to know more about the Voice of Job Seekers and what I do, you can go to voiceofjobseekers.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn and YouTube and X. Though X has kind of been a slow grind lately,
Mm.
but we'll go into that a little bit later. Welcome back to the show, Jack Kelly. How are you, sir?
Great. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to see you
Yeah.
again.
Well, when you put out new stuff, or if I want to talk about some articles, uh, that, and we'll get a chance to talk about both your
Mhm.
new book,
Yeah.
"Thriving Chaos: How to Be Super Successful," et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely want to have you on talk about that. And we were just talking. You can only get it on a Kindle right now, correct?
hmm Yes. Well, not that you don't need the physical Kindle. You could just download it
Right, right.
and get it and just read it on your phone, laptop,
Yes.
computer,
Yeah.
whatever.
And any app,
hmm
any device will do,
Yeah.
or where that is compatible. So let's talk about your book for a moment. And you had your first book, Happy and Succeeding, and I think this was a very appropriate sequel to
hmm
that. You could have just been Happy and Succeeding edition number two, but I think you want to address something more relevant that's going on now, or the latest at least, as
Yeah.
opposed to back then. It was pandemic, and it was a lot of doom and gloom kind of thing, and this is not that way.
Yeah. So the impetus for writing this is I started seeing, all the data points showing that
Hmm.
things are not going so well. And what happens is that people tend to, they have their lives, their family, their kids, so they're not really kind of leaning into, hey, what's going on in the economy, what's going on in the job market, what's going on in the stock market. They're living their lives. And I
Right,
try to, and maybe because, I write for Forbes, so I'm kind of always thinking, oh, what's happening? What are the changes and so forth? And I follow it. And over time, I started seeing that things are not looking so great.
right,
Things are kind of bad,
yeah,
and I thought it would be helpful to share, what's going on. Now, it doesn't mean I have all the answers or I'm clairvoyant about it, but one person's viewpoint of how things are going. But then also through the book, offering different ways how to get through and succeed and do well in your life and your work during really tough, challenging times.
yeah. Well, you write it all in your fourth column. You
Mhm.
write nearly 3 times a week.
You've got more than that, bro.
And there's
Yeah,
sometimes you
yeah,
publish 2 or 3 times in a day.
it's
I
a lot.
mean,
Yeah,
yeah, so you're kind of on top of a lot of what's going
yeah,
on as far as it relates to the economy. As things relate to the economy, it often translates on how it affects the job
yeah.
market. So it all makes sense to me. I'm just wondering, sometimes, so how do you do it? But you got a team that helps. You see, yeah, those of us who write solo have to do everything ourselves. You get to pull some strings. So I don't blame you. That's not a knock against you. That's great because we need that perspective on a daily basis, and a lot of people don't take it that seriously. Not even some of our colleagues in the career space.
Also what it is, Mark. I think I'm a little like OCD, and or where I have. It's like I almost have to always go to writing something and figure something out.
Yeah.
And a lot
Hmm.
of times I don't want to. I'm like, gosh, I got to give my eyes a rest from just staring at a computer all day. But I'm like,
Yes.
oh, I got this on my mind. Let me get it down. So I just get pulled into it.
Yeah.
Um, but then that's part one of the things also that I talk about in the book is that you try to have your routines to stay focused. You want to
Hmm.
find out what you're good at and what you like doing, and then really level up on it and double down on it and keep moving forward. So it's the same thing. Like every day, I'm going to write something. Every day, I'm going to work out one way or another, either going to
Hmm.
the gym, maybe playing tennis, whatever. But constantly, you want to be kind of moving forward because if you don't, you end up falling behind. So it's
Yeah.
it's kind of this in a way, kind of the Spartan mindset is that You want to keep moving forward. You want to keep growing. You want to keep building, because when you stop, that's when everything just collapses.
Yeah, that's kind of the number one career advice that most people take. But I think even at that, people have stopped. They stop churning at certain points, and they think that if they stop churning, things will going to continue on in motion. But a lot of it's about momentum. A lot of it's about
100%.
creating those habits, and carry that momentum. Of course, it's okay to take a break. Of course,
Hmm.
it's even better when you take a strategic break.
Yeah.
But yeah, we all need those breaks. But all in all, a lot of it's about momentum, and everything that you do, every little bit of learning, every little bit of writing, every little planning is supposed to be momentum, and that momentum should be continuing throughout the year. That's where a lot of people go, well, not really. I just want another job when they come down to it. And then when you're unemployed 6 months, what do I have to give you a job? Well, we told you 6 months ago you need to keep the momentum going, didn't we? Isn't that right?
Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought it up, because that's such an important point that people really don't think a lot about. Because when you get that momentum, it's like a flywheel effect.
Mm-hmm.
It just builds and builds. And it's a weird thing. I don't understand like how it all works, but it works that way. So
Yeah.
let's say you and I have a conversation, and maybe there's somebody else who then joins us here. So now you meet somebody new who then opens up a door to do something else. And then that person shares something to get you to the next level, and so on. And then it just keeps growing. So
Yeah.
when you keep moving, like an object in motion, it stays in motion. But when it stops, it stops.
Yeah.
And then it's really hard to pick it up again. Think about it, Mark. If like you work out and then you say, I'm going to take a day
Mm-hmm.
off,
Right.
then another day, and then a week. How hard is it to then get back to it afterwards, right? It is so
It,
hard
it
to
is
get.
absolutely. Once you get, for me, going more than a week without working out, it's not that I'm so obsessed with my body or with my health, but I know that I lose momentum
Mhm.
if I'm off more than a week. And even these days, I don't even like taking a week off anymore. Maybe I'll take, like last week, I took Friday off. But, having said that, I also add an extra few things to kind of keep the momentum. And that's why a lot of people don't get where they're going in their job search, because they don't see they see it sort of a static as opposed to dynamic.
Yeah.
Instead of perpetually moving, they're just moving in sequences just to do enough to get enough, and then they stop. When really, when you get that next job, you know that something could happen the next few months or even the next few years. I think what's ingrained in our brain is we think that that it will go on just like our parents told us, and we've heard this 1,000 times, but it's true. People behave that way, not that they don't think that way.
Now, Mark, you focus so much on the job search experience. What
Hmm.
do you think? Because you're speaking to people every single day. Are they having a hard time, or are they? What's going on?
I think the people who are getting streams of opportunities understand it's perpetual motion. And I forgot what that's called. Whatever stays in motion will have enough traction to
Mhm.
continue in motion. And the more momentum you get, the better your opportunities will become, because you get to see a whole lot more. What people still are in the habit of doing, they get this and their settling point. Some people are smart to settle, maybe get their training, get the first 90
Mhm.
days in, and get over the time they need to get traction in that job. Then they become vigilant again. That's not as bad as the people who are just looking for that next job. And I think about how many people who are really intentional with their job search, and people who are just kind of just looking at just doing a job search just to get anything they want. I understand people are where they are, but in order to kind of be with the people who continually just seem to get a steady stream of jobs, they're always moving. If it's learning, if it's teaching, if it's doing, if it's making mistakes, learning something new, a lot of things could accomplish that, but it's not just one thing and not just one way either. I mean, no matter what strategy you choose, assuming that any strategy is good strategy, it's not always, but if any strategy is good strategy, you should always find ways to capitalize and build on those things. And the thing I see is that people stop
Mhm.
and they stop and they get settled and just enough to kind of make it through the next few months, and then before then, they're out of work again. And it's kind of tough. I understand life gets in the way, but all of it's got to be managed. But all of it's also got to move forward.
Do you think some people stop because it's so frustrating, the interview process? Like there's so much you could just go. They set up an interview for you. Hey, Mark is going to call Jack at 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock comes.
Hmm.
3 o'clock goes. It's 4 o'clock. You don't get that
I
call, and you're like, oh, this sucks. I got ghosted again. Do you think
I
that's
wish it
a part
were.
of it?
Yeah, that's a part of it, but I wish it were that simple.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing we need to assume. There's several things that need to be true and tried here. A job is temporary, period. A job is not going to be your home. It's not going to be somewhere where you'll settle. Two, a job search is also takes, as I've said, you've heard me say it many times,
Mm-hmm.
it is a lifestyle. It is part of your life now if you're going to have at least to keep connecting to jobs when that job is gone or when that job opportunity has failed. You got to keep going. There's no time for stop for most of us. Some of us may have the luxury. Like I was telling you, my youngest son moved to Baltimore. He was able to find a job within 3 weeks. But his momentum started way before he moved because he had a job. He was able to capitalize on his strengths. He was able to put some things out there before he started getting there. So when he landed, he had 4 or 5 interviews right away.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when people, and you know, I nudged him, but I didn't push him. He wasn't pushed by any of us. It was a nudge. It was a reminder. It said these are things, and we also talked about it. So he had that in my ear. Most people don't have that kind of person in their
Mm-hmm.
ear. So all in all, to say that it is a lot of things. I understand there's ghost jobs, there's scams, tons of interviews. There's 10 interviews for one position. There's people promising to get back to you and they don't. There's the false promises. Jobs aren't what they say they're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be. All those things can matter, but really, you can't assume that it's going. You know, you've got to keep moving, and that's going to mean that you're going to have to try to get several interviews. If you don't have several interviews, you're not going to be successful until you have several that you can look at and you get to choose and not waiting for somebody to choose you. We can go to a very deep part of it, but there's so much to say what it is, and I can't say one thing or another that's going to paint a broad enough brush for everyone. But it is something that people are going to have to learn to be in perpetual motion about.
Now, Mark, you mentioned about job scams, and it seems to be you're running with this. This is like your crusade. So,
I've gone deep down the hole. I don't know if I'm coming
to be
back
fair, I
anytime
didn't
soon.
notice. Like, can I tell you? I really didn't notice anything about it. But then I kept seeing you posting about it, and then other people posting about it. I'm like, what's going on here? So, for people who, like myself, is still not really sure what the heck is going on, can you kind of
Right.
share, like, is it really that bad, and what are you, like, what do you have to watch out for?
It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
And let's just say, if there's any place to start explaining it, scams have gone on for years. People have been getting scammed for years. Technology has made it so that these scammers are using, you know, you know, the social engineering tactics,
Well, tell me
like
about it,
they
because
were,
I tell you something, I really don't
like
want to know
they're,
what you're talking about.
yeah.
What kind of stuff?
Well, they play on our behaviors, like we talked
Okay.
about. They know that people are going to mass apply to hundreds of jobs. and you talk to some of the people, and I try to have conversations on a regular basis, daily. And how I do it is I go through LinkedIn, I put job scams in the search box, and I look for different posts. Some of the posts have nothing, or have it's just I'm wanting people to stop, or this is what happened to me. So I try to jump into some of
Right.
those conversations, and a lot of people mass applied to this. I applied to 200 jobs this month and I haven't got it. Or I've applied to 200 jobs in the last few months and we got anything. Well, if you weren't vigilant, then likely you are a target because you've applied somewhere along the line. You've applied to a fake job and you've applied to fake employers, and
But
they
what's
have
their
your
game? Are they
information.
trying to steal your
They
information?
want
Trying
your
to,
private information.
okay.
I mean, yeah, we could talk about they want your cash, and they've been pretty good at getting people's cash. I saw where one woman was scammed $110,000. It's insane what people go through to do something, and most of the scams are built around something you could do pretty easy and scale it with the promises. If you do work hard, so to speak, you can make a lot of money. And then what people don't ask themselves in the middle, man, this is pretty good because there's one woman that she was getting money in the bank, but she was asked to reinvest that money. But then when the roosters came to crow, all that money gone, and the bank had stopped getting those deposited checks, and the banks didn't even pick it up sometimes. So all that to say is people are getting scammed. They're getting is you know, yeah, they're getting tricked, but it's getting tricked by a lot of their own propensities to,
Mhm.
that they're going to go and they're going to look and it's a numbers game. Well, within that numbers game, if you applied to 100, I bet you 10 of them were fake employers. I bet you. And yeah, we're assuming that Indeed and LinkedIn, all these places are 100% safe. We found that not to be true as well. So people are basically getting lured through what people understand their behaviors to be is the mass supply is to not check carefully and not research carefully the employer or the person that they talk to. A lot of it's because the offer sounds really good to be true. They met somebody who's nice, which who doesn't respond to a nice person, right? They understand that people are desperate at times, especially if they've been unemployed for a long time. Their funds are running out or have run out. No more unemployment. They become a target. They take advantage of the fact that people share pretty liberally on social, and all that gets picked up. Not to mention that these scammers also are not just tech savvy, not just tactical in using social engineering, but they've become pretty great marketers. And I have somebody who says that that's not completely true. They are marketers because they're able to go to someone and have a conversation and fool someone to think that that product is the thing that they should buy. And the buy is basically them filling out the application with their personal information, and the end game being that now that I have your social security number, your birth date, and your bank account, I could take advantage of you for a while. And maybe they won't have the same bank account information for a while. Your birth date doesn't change, and neither does your social security change. So you've got to do so after you get scammed. A lot of people don't do that work either. They don't go back and they don't check on. They don't report to any. Hey, my social security was stolen. Hey, my bank account was breached. My privacy is being breached, and figure out and putting things in place so they won't happen again. But they don't do that. They think, oh, I got scammed out of the money. That's pretty much it. But they have your personal information. They can repurpose that, so to speak, for lack of a better word. They can reuse that information and perhaps sell that list that they have to some other scammer that's just come back and come maybe in a different way and scam you in a different way. But it's a vicious cycle that could continue on for years. And surprisingly, a lot of people don't realize that they got you before they get you. And I know I'm rambling just a little bit, but they got you before they get you. They have a lot of your information already before you get scammed. They have a lot of our information. They're just trying to see what else they can get. They may not have your social security number, your birth date, even your wedding date, even your start date where you start at the company
Mm.
that you're at. That also makes you pretty vulnerable because then they can become you. They can become an imposter of you, apply to hundreds of jobs, and you're not being able to know or benefit from the fact they might have gotten interviews and may have scammed the company out of hiring them for money. So it goes a lot of different ways. It's not just one thing that just happens that we could say be on guard. We got to be vigilant and got to alert the public as much as we possibly can, especially those who care about job seekers
Mhm.
and care about, uh, how they're doing. And really, because how they do in jobs is how they're going to do everywhere else they show up.
Yeah, so what else are you seeing? Are you seeing other crazy stuff, or that's really?
Oh, I can go way down the road, but I think
Yeah.
the scams are where are you know people are not finding out until something actually happens, unfortunately.
Mhm.
And I think when people have been reckless in their job search, again, mass applying to a bunch of jobs, um, not being consistent in building their careers, not taking on and building their knowledge base and their expertise, not getting the professional development, they remain stagnant. They remain very static instead of having dynamic movement in the job search. And again, that's just one piece.
Mhm.
There's other sectors that experience many different things. We rarely talk about federal jobs, and you know, federal jobs these days might be a little bit easier to get because when people use the USA usajobs.gov, you're not going to find scams there. It's very well guarded and very well vetted. Uh, there's some other places where people can get flex jobs. Is one where they vet a lot and they pay close attention, but you got to pay for that. So you know the sustainability, uh, green jobs are still good jobs, but there are also scams there too. But there's a lot less there because there's not a great demand there as like in tech or customer service and some of the other industries. So, whew, and that's just the short part of
Mm.
it.
It's very frightening to hear all that going on. That's crazy.
It is, but scams should have taught or should be teaching people a lesson that you know take look be much more intentional and strategic and vigilant about every job you apply to because any job could be a scam if not from the point of a fake employer or a fake job. But you know I talked about earlier this week, last week rather, how there's this very gray line between ghost jobs and fake jobs. There are, depending how you define ghost jobs, but there's this very fine line, and the main common denominator is that people end up without a job when they apply for it. So, you know, that's also that's not as scary to me as the fake jobs. I think people can discern, and there are ways to discern. People can discern how to figure out what's a ghost job and what's a fake job. But a lot of people who are not vigilant and who are uneducated don't know. So
What I
there you
find
go.
what I find about fake jobs, a couple of things, is that you ever hear like the JOLTS report, where the government will kind of will say, all right, how many jobs were posted, how many jobs
Hmm.
online, to
Hmm.
measure how robust the job market is.
Yep. I know where you're
And,
going.
and so they'll say, oh, there's, one job or 10 jobs for every person, like those kind of
Hmm.
things. But what they don't understand is that a lot of them are fake jobs. But when I say fake jobs, I don't
Hmm.
necessarily mean like they're like made up jobs. But what happens, like let's take a real live example. The
Hmm.
July the July jobs report was really bad. It was like only, let's say, 100. I'm making up a number. It's like 111,000 new jobs, which
Hmm.
for the last few months is more like 200 plus.
Hmm.
And that's one of the reasons when on Monday the stock market really, cratered, because
Plummeted.
like,
Right.
oh, what's going on? This is terrible. And I wanted to just yell at the TV for for CNBC and Bloomberg and all these others, say, wait a minute, don't you realize in July you have July 4th weekend, you have the holiday weekend, you have the nice weather, so people aren't looking for a job during that time period. They're easing off the gas. They're taking their family away to the beach. They're going to
Hmm.
Disney. They're just using up all their PTO time off, so that yes, their jobs, but like they're not really following up. The HR person is away, and then when he or she comes back, the hiring manager's away. When they come back, someone else is away. So, yeah, is there a job there? And the job is real, but nothing is happening because it's the summer. People aren't around. There's no, like
Right.
you talked before, no momentum because it starts, stops, starts, stops. And then a
Yep.
lot of times too, I've noticed these companies will post jobs, and they're doing
Hmm.
it not necessarily they want to hire somebody, but let's say you have a thin staff, because we've seen, particularly, let's say, the tech sector, where there are massive layoffs, and then the
Hmm.
people who are remaining get frustrated, like, oh my god, all right, I still have a job, but I'm freaked out. I don't want to be next, and then the work gets dumped on them, and they're like, oh gee, what do I do? Like, it's not fair. They're not giving me any more money, but I don't want to complain too much because then maybe I'll get fired. So what
Hmm.
ends up happening is that they'll post a job, the company, to make it look like, don't worry, you know, we're
Yeah.
gonna have we're gonna have the replacements for you. We're gonna get people for you. But lots of times it doesn't come, but they're just saying that to appease the people who are there. So is it a real job? Yeah. But are they really trying hard to fill it? Yeah, they're just trying to appease the workers to say, don't worry, we're going to get to it. We're going to get to it, and you know how things are. We'll get
Yeah.
to it next week,
Yeah.
the following week, and nothing happens. So it's a real job.
That
It's not
and
getting filled.
that's not even coming close to how many people are really off the grid. People who have not filed for unemployment or can't refile for unemployment because their unemployment is run out in a very short time. Most people don't get the luxurious Facebook,
Severance
exit
package
plan.
is true. Yeah.
Most people, a lot of employers are stopping that. You're lucky to get a couple of weeks, and
Mhm.
that couple of weeks might be the last of your vacation time. Uh, if you happen to get more than that, that's a luxury, and most people don't get that.
See,
So
here's
what?
another thing, Mark. You know what I mean?
Mm,
But to piggyback on what you're saying, this
yes.
is kind of another kind of anomaly that goes on with the job market that kind of distorts everything. So
Hmm.
that, like you said, let's take the people from FANG, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, all those. If you're laid
Right.
off, these folks are making two, three, four, five, six, seven, 800,000 a year. They're not
Right.
applying for benefits because, first of all, they're going to feel weird doing it. Secondly, they have enough money; they don't need it. So
Right.
when you look at the unemployment, that we're not counting them on the rolls, so it makes it look like the economy is doing better, but it's not
Depending
because
where they
they
live.
are.
Yeah.
Then, like you said, people who tapped out, whether sort of retired or just like giving up, you don't count those
Hmm.
people. So now you have more people who you don't count, but they should be counted. So like it's a game that the government is playing. It's like a fake game because if they really took, and I'm not trying to be a wise guy saying this, the homeless people, the people who've just tapped out, the people who are
Mhm.
kind of just, not, just giving up, throwing their hands in the air, people who are underemployed, people, like we said, who lost their jobs but they're not filing. If we really looked at all those numbers, the unemployment rate would be so much higher,
Sure.
so much higher.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
It
kind of
would
a
be.
fake thing going on too. That it's a game.
And that's a continuous thing. We used to talk about this on Job Seeker Nation, right? We used to talk about, yeah, it used to be, when it got to like 8, 9%, 10% to some degree, it was a whole lot more because there were
Mhm.
people just not people who gave up because it was very dismal for about a year and a half or so at one point. But then it became a hiring spree.
Mhm.
And there's some jobs I've seen more of than less. That there's some industries that are on a hiring spree for whatever reason. But I tell you, the whole AI thing it is not working out the way that people thought it would work out. As far as whether it's AI taking over jobs or that people were firing other that companies were firing part of their staff because they're unemployed because we're going to hire somebody that's going to be able to use AI based tools is kind of crazy, right? So I think you know those numbers are just going to be they're like the Nielsen ratings.
Mark, you
The way
hit it
I
right on the
put
head
it,
because
they're like the Nielsen ratings. The Nielsen ratings, back they used to have a box like every 10th to 20th house.
mhm,
It doesn't count every house. It just counts that particular house. So when the Nielsen rating comes up and you see all these great shows, there's great shows from the people in that house, not
mhm.
everybody that's across the board. So I think, that's the way I look at unemployment numbers and all that. But I think when it comes down to, uh, you know, a lot of the chaos is going and all that, when you talk about thriving chaos, you and I kind of look at it the same way is that when yeah, you got to take the family to the beach. You got to take some time for yourself. But I think a lot of people they do stop, not just like that talk about working out. You stop for that one workout. You stop for a whole month, and it's kind of hard to regenerate that momentum again. After no matter what you had before you work out or before you job search,
Mhm.
that momentum is gone. You're starting from ground zero for the most part.
To go back to your uh, AI example,
Mm-hmm.
that's another that was another leg of why the stock market cratered on Monday because
Mm-hmm.
Goldman Sachs came out with a report saying, "Hey," and I'll make up these numbers because I don't know it off the top of my head.
Right,
That
right.
you're paying like $600 billion to build these large language models and building these AI and training AI, what have you. But then
Mm-hmm.
it's like the emperor has no clothes. You say, wait,
Yeah,
so we're investing billions and billions of dollars, but then when you look at the profits or the revenue, you're like, huh, there's really not a lot of revenue, not a lot of profits. So, oops, like, so when you saw it, like, I'm sure you felt like Nvidia, right? That like went,
right.
skyrocketed up. It's like everyone was like, oh man, I wish I would have bought Nvidia. I'd be so rich. Then it just came down because they realized, I think long term, my opinion, I think AI is going to be infused in a lot of things. Short term, right now, they're paying a lot of money out, not necessarily bringing a lot of money in,
Right,
which yeah,
right.
which is a big issue.
Well, I think the reality as well is that AI, people are using AI whether they realize it or not. Most people don't scale the knowledge of AI because they don't they're not trying to figure out how it could be used in their next career or their next job. And when you don't research and look at industries and don't see how AI is playing a part of it, you just don't know. You're just guessing that yeah, you'll be able to do it. And to certain degrees, there are few people who do, but most people they don't realize that already that's it's a part of their life. It's a part of their life where you use your phone and the facial recognition. That's in part AI. That's already a part of your life. But to use it as a tool for work, you've got to find a way to make it valuable so that you can say, hey, I can use these tools in these ways to make it valuable for you. And and people are kind of in between those 2 points.
I gotta tell you, for me, let's say as it pertains to writing, it's like a
Hmm.
godsend because turn back the clock just a year or so ago, if I would have to
Right.
research something for an article that I don't know much about the topic, it
Hmm.
takes so long. I have to Google it, then you go through all this stuff, and it doesn't really give you exactly what you want.
Right.
Now, I could take like Perplexity or some of these AI, put in exactly the prompts that I want to get. They'll
Hmm.
get it for me. They'll give a citation to make sure it's legit. I'll double check it. So it helps learn, like the learning curve
Yep.
goes up so quickly so
Yep.
that I could, let's say I'm interviewing somebody for cybersecurity kind of stuff. And I don't really know much
Hmm.
about it, but by doing like smart prompts, I feel like, yeah, I've just learned so much about it that I could talk intelligently about it and write intelligently about it because, I was able to get all that data, all that information so super quickly and to refine it that it's so helpful.
Absolutely. As writers, we're not just we don't want it to do something for us. Like we said, write this article for me. And that's
It's
what
like teaching me.
mostly,
It's more
yeah,
teaching me, like what it like, especially things I don't know at all. So it's like,
right.
oh, that's what it is. Oh, now I get it.
Yeah, and people don't take that data as an introduction; they take it as gospel, and that's the difference between somebody who really understands what AI is supposed to do
Mhm.
and what it's not supposed to do. AI has limitations still, especially when it comes maybe not from historical, but it may not be as relevant depending upon what tool you're using and what framework you're using and the questions you're asking it. So if you never ask it to ask a question in several different ways,
Mhm.
you may not know that there's several different answers. The novice is just going to ask one question and say, this is good enough. As
Mhm.
opposed to some of us who write or are diligent researchers, we're going to ask it in several different ways so that we're getting different answers and then we can kind of find where the common links are or find where the discrepancies are, which sometimes happen. But I think people don't see it that as it's a skill set that you're going to be using for a long time. It's just like Google. When Google first came out, Google didn't do anything for us, but it took us somewhere. So we understand that it could take me to the answers, not always answers the question directly for me. With the fact that it can now use AI and search, you have options and you can compare and contrast to make more informed decisions. So I think people who are using for job search who are expecting it to do something like write my resume, write me a cover letter, you're missing the boat of what it could possibly do, and you're missing out a lot of information, a lot of ways to that you can scale it for your career for the long term. And this is just one way.
Mhm.
So I think that you're is valid for what you say. You use it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I read your work and it's well researched. There's plenty of links and there's plenty of context. And those are the things that I look forward to reading. I always get that from when I'm reading you. When I'm
Nice.
reading elsewhere, when I'm reading elsewhere, the context is ultimately missing. And for if you read enough, you could tell what's AI and what's not AI because it doesn't build the context for you
Mhm.
really well. Especially where if there's personal inflections involved, that's something that AI can't do. Personality is something else that AI can't do either. It can't add your personality, nor does it have your frame of reference. So all those things to say, and I know we went down a really deep hole on this, but I think it's really important people note, especially people want to use AI and try to understand what it is for your job search. It's a tool. It's a tool that could be useful, and it takes some time to learn. Most of us are still learning. what it can do and what the limitations are and where it will exceed our expectations. Any more thoughts on that, Jack?
That's good. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we said a lot, everything but what's in your book. But that's what we
It's
do,
all right.
right?
That's all right. It's all good.
that,
It's okay.
that's what we do, right? We
Yeah.
but this is all about, in essence, of the theme of thriving in chaos,
Yeah.
right? You're going down, and you're getting down in the dirt. And for you to thrive, it takes some time in the dirt to learn. And whether it may not just be AI, it could be the latest development in your industry. Or if you're a generalist, what are some things that could take your career to the next level, and where you can spend some time in the dirt playing? Because we've all done it. We did it as kids, right? And we still do it as adults to some degree, especially when you have kids and you get back down the dirt with the kids,
Mhm.
so to speak. But that's where it is. So, what would you say the top keys are? If we were to list, what the top keys are for people to thrive right now in this particular job market?
That's a good question. And just to give kind of the backdrop, my
Mm-hmm.
own, because sometimes you want to have a model of what to build upon, how things are. And the
Right.
model that I see is, at least here and now, the economy, the job market, the world, not so good, not so good.
Mm.
But, I don't mean to be, dark about things, but we
Right.
have, literally millions of people flooding, coming in here. We have no idea who they are. We don't know, are they dangerous? We don't know if they're, terrorists. We don't know if they have ill intent. And we see, every day an article, some, you know, person who come in here illegally, ran someone over, stabbed someone, killed someone. It's so we've become a nation that's really getting unhinged. It's more
Mm.
violent. Look at any big city like Chicago, Philly, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Dirty, lawlessness, violence, looting. It's we're in a bad state. And
Mm.
do I want to talk about this? Not really, because it's not pleasant. But I feel it's important to bring it up because this is the new reality that we're in. It's
Mm.
not as easy as it used to be. It's not as fun as it used to be. You have to be way more vigilant. You have to be much more concerned. Getting a job, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, was relatively easy. Now, particularly, let's say for white collar professionals, it's
Mm.
brutally hard. If you look at the monthly jobs report, when it comes to net new jobs for like white collar professionals, like zilch. Literally, I had a conversation with the head of for Glassdoor, the head economist, and when
Mm.
I asked him about like how many white collar jobs have been there, and he said zero, and I thought he was just kidding, and like
Right.
and I'm like, his name is Aaron. I'm like, Aaron, like when you say zero, do you literally mean zero or you just mean like little? He goes, no, zero. Because they're not really hiring these folks. And that's one of the reasons why people get so frustrated because they see these jobs, they go on LinkedIn and it's like, 5,000 people applying, they're not getting it, and it kills their self-esteem and self-confidence. And they
Right.
feel it's them, but they don't realize this is what's going on. It's because they don't broadcast. Because when you look at the jobs that have been created, they're really government jobs to make the government look good and the administration look good. They're
Mm.
part-time jobs, and they're multi-part-time jobs where people are juggling a few jobs. And then there's a lot of hospitality, food workers and such. And then you have healthcare, but a lot of healthcare is for like all the immigrants coming in to take care of them. So
Mm.
it's like we're building a house of cards that a strong wind just blows it down. And
Yeah.
the media, no one talks about it. So I want to bring up because no one really wants to hear about these things. They don't want to hear that we have trillions of dollars of debt here and no one has any idea how we're going to deal with it.
Right.
So to then move on from what I'm saying here, as people, what I want to achieve in the book is say, hey, we got to understand the reality we're in. We can't pretend. We can't be an ostrich and put our head in the sand and think everything is good. We have to say, hey, we're in a tougher time. It's not going to be as easy getting a job. Can you get a job? Of course, absolutely. But it's not easy. It's hard. It's challenging. You're not going to head against the wall. And it's not as easy as it used to be. So you have to try harder. You have to work harder. You have to work twice as much. You have to push twice as much. And it's a different type of mindset, different type of environment. And you have to be really smart about things. You have to make sure that you network with people. And when people say, oh, networking, it's icky, too bad. You have to kind of build the connections to help you out, to get leads, to get access to hidden jobs, to get a door open for you, to get a recommendation. So you constantly have to be strategic and smart about how to move forward with your career. And then also what I want to add, because people like different ways of thinking. So I put in the book how to, stoic mindset, how, people who are interested in manifestations, affirmations, growth mindset, different ways how to look at it. Like I gave a model of how I see the world now. Other people see it differently. So
Right.
they may look at it and this way I offer all sorts of other ways how you can kind of, fix your, put your mind to say, hey, I think by having manifestations, I'm going to get that job. Or by having affirmations, I'm going to give myself more confidence. Or having grit, you know, being strong and grit and dealing with rejection and dealing with getting knocked down, but you get back up again and really building that up so that no matter what happens, you're not going to give up and you keep going forward. So kind of sharing these kind of concepts with people, which is a very different than the traditional, hey, here's what you do to get a job. It's more of, your mindset, the way you think, and then the way they think, how you can act and move forward and build something and create something. Because in this environment, no one's going to hand you anything. It's all up to you. No one's going to knock on the door and say, here's a job. There you go. You have to actually knock the door down to get in somewhere to get that job.
Hmm.
So it's so that's kind of in a way the vibe. And it sounds kind of harsh, and I don't I hate that it has to sound harsh, but I'd be
Hmm.
bullshitty if I was like, oh, don't worry, everything is great. Don't worry, just send a resume and you'll get a job. It
Right.
doesn't work like that anymore. Could some people do that? Of course, but it's really a challenging thing. So I'm trying to give out all sorts of different ideas where people are going through this, and it's not just getting a job, but it's getting ahead in your career, getting ahead in your life, to kind of find ways to say how in a tough environment, in a chaotic environment, a traumatic environment, how can I thrive and not just get in bed and put the covers over my head and say, this is just awful. I give up.
Right. Well, I think there's something to said for everybody that you think about. Oh, you know, my father and maybe some in my generation called
Mhm,
100 people. They're able to get a job that way without ever applying to a job.
mhm.
That's one thing. Okay, that's going to work. Yeah, you
Yeah.
called 100 people, and you probably these days you're going to get 90% voicemail. And would somebody call you back eventually? Maybe, maybe not. But you can get a job that way. Is it the best use of time? That could be argued to say not really, especially if you want to have a choice of jobs. But I think people we get caught up too much in saying the right way, the wrong way, when certain people want to use certain options because that's the way they function for so long. But then when you stop functioning for so long, you got to do something else. So it's better to have a variety of tools than
Mhm.
to just have one tool that you rely on. For most people, they rely on going to all the job sites and applying to several hundred jobs and getting very few results and a few more scam calls than they should have because they've done it in a way that I definitely don't think is very strategic and very productive. But if that works for that person, uh, yeah. But we can decide what we can argue about what works and what might whether you wasted a lot of time doing. So I think what you're saying is very true, is that people do need to realize what the state of the world is, and you've got to adjust But you got to keep what's most important
Mhm.
in mind is that I need to find a job and I can't be too distracted by a lot of the other things that are going on. So,
What
did
do you
you want
find?
to add anything? Go ahead.
Yeah, what do you find is like um, one of the more successful ways to get noticed and to get a job?
Um, and depending on what your version of success is, the one that
Mhm.
I like the most, the one that I see people doing that they when they have jobs, they're kind of let me put it this way: if I was, you know, working, and I know that in the next year, that perhaps that might be time for me to move on, I'm
Mhm.
going to start with an Evernote, use my Evernote, and start putting in the companies that I would like to work at. I don't know if they have a position open or not, but at least I'm going to start writing in the companies that sound really good, at least when I hear or I've
Mhm.
heard people say it. I'm also going to attach a name of the person uh, that told me that they work for. I'm going to get to know that person and ask them questions throughout the time. And I'm going to start building that sheet up with the things that I like about that position or about those jobs or about that company. And I'm going to look at how my skills might fit into those particular jobs or that particular company, and how I'm an asset in those jobs. In what ways would I bring value that they might not have
Mhm.
already? So I'm going to, of course, address my questions all around. And it gets even narrower from there. Get down to, okay, can have I actually had a conversation with if I had a conversation with those that person, if I had a list of 25 or 50,
Mhm.
let's say, I'm going to be sure to talk to every one of those people and to see if they could even introduce me to someone else. And I start following the connections because most people find their jobs from one connection to another. What Mark Miller calls the second and third ties. If I ask Jack, does he know someone? He introduces me, and then that person introduces me to someone else. That's your second and third tie.
Mhm.
So that's where you can get really good at job searching if you go down that line. And again, we're talking about a year at a time as opposed to waiting till I got the 2 week notice or the week notice or that day that I was told I was laid off. Because I'm going to assume every job is temporary. Every job is going to lay
Mhm.
me off or it's going to fire me for some particular reason. I know, again, that's just one of the realities that you talk about, that that's going to come someday. It may be 2 or 3 years down the line, which would be a greater jump, but I'm not going to lose that momentum. So that's how I would go about in approaching a job search today. I wouldn't wait. If I'm solid now, I'm happy now. This might be the opportunity for me to leverage what I have as far as being employed, avoid the employment bias, avoid the scarcity mindset for me to find the next opportunities to start now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think
Thoughts?
that's, yeah, I think that's one of the best ways to, especially in a tougher job market, to
Mm-hmm.
find and cultivate, network of people that you could turn to and say, "Hey, Mark, do you know anybody who works at, ABC Widget Company?" And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, I do, by the way." Yeah. They're like, "Oh, can I give you my resume to give it to the person?" Because then you just cut right in line.
Yep.
So all the other folks were just sending their resume to a database and whatever. This way, it's a real person. You know the person. You can vouch for the person. You can say good
Mm-hmm.
things about the person. So I agree with you. I think that is one of the key ways, a
I mean,
differentiator to
yeah,
stand
and
out.
I think that people, if you can even connect someone, that to someone
Yeah.
that doesn't know exists,
Yeah.
and you may have nothing to do with that job, but that person will also look out for you because you've been their advocates. Hey, you should meet that person. They work here where you are. I don't want it, but maybe you can get it. That's another way to bring other people
Mhm.
in. So let's say let's say half the people in that 25 you could do that for, or even a tenth, 5 people. You've just built your network
Right.
and built your own ecosystem in a way that will eventually find its way back to you. So, it, and this is not to shame any other strategy that anybody said. This is what I would do because I understand the dynamics
Mm.
of how people uh, respond to adversity. I would try to think, okay, it's coming eventually. I better prepare. That includes to
Mhm.
putting away years worth of finances just in case I got laid off, even though it might be a nice package. I had that year in the bank may give me more time to leverage. But, you know, do all those other responsible things. But, you got to assume that this job is temporary.
That makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. Well, that was good, man. We covered a lot of territory.
Yeah, yeah, we did. We covered more than I had planned to cover. But I want to get you to chime in real quick, and you kind of allude to
Mhm.
some of this here this morning. We wrote an article about the recession and the potential recession. We've been talking about this for 3 years now.
Mhm.
we've been talking about it since Job Seeker Nation about a recession coming in. We actually did have a short recession of sorts, right? Right after the pandemic and those months. But after that, we thought there was going to be more doom and gloom. Some people feel like it's a recession now with prices going up and the value they're getting back is so little. So your take ultimately on it
It's like
is,
it's like the recession. The recession used to be like 2 quarters of GDP, declines. Then all of a sudden, it's like, no, it's really not this, it's something else, and whatever. Because I think at the end of the day, it really is different, dependent. I'm
mhm,
not saying this from this is not an economic viewpoint. This is more just like a normal human being thing. Is that it depends what industry you're in, what sector. Some sectors might be
yeah,
booming, some like just like depression, not even recession. So it's each one you have to kind of see on your own.
yeah,
Sometimes things are good, sometimes things are bad. It's just I don't know. I don't know what they throw out recession like it's a boogeyman. Like, oh my god, the recession! Oh
right,
no, you know what I mean? I think it all depends. What
yeah,
industry you're in, what job. It's like if you lost your job, yeah, you feel it's a recession and or depression. If you know what I mean. And if your neighbor's
absolutely,
working, that neighbor's like, hey, everything's great. What are you talking about? This is awesome. So but then it all goes back to like just you got to do everything like you were talking about just to keep it going, so that if something
yeah.
goes wrong, you don't just get caught flat-footed and like, oh, now what do I do? I got to start from scratch.
Yeah, we know enough now that being caught flat-footed
Yeah.
is just. I understand people's attention and where they need to put it,
Mm.
and there's extenuating circumstances because family members get sick, people have babies, unseen things happen. I get that, but for a large part of us who should be much more intentional. You mentioned in a Forbes article, well, and I'll just take a sentence here or two if you like, about the career advice from TikTokers. Uh,
Hmm. Yeah.
and I thought we've done away with that, but apparently there are a few who take very seriously. At least the media does to some degree about TikTok influencers and their career advice.
Yeah. Like I don't mean to be mean because, you know, a lot of them have good intention. They want to help
Hmm.
people. But then also, there's something where, hey, they want to get the clicks, they want to get the attention. So
Sure.
they're going to say what they're going to say. But you have to separate for people who watch them.
Yes.
Take it with a grain of salt. But that's the same thing with anybody. If someone asks me for advice, they got to take it with a grain of salt. They ask you, you got to take it.
Absolutely.
You can't just say, "Oh, Jack says this, so it has to be right." Mark says this, so yeah,
Right.
everyone has to kind of say and filter it. And there might be
Right.
good elements of that what they say, and not so good elements. You want to kind of see which works for you. But there
Yeah.
are some things that definitely, in my opinion, there are those like a couple of things that really I think is bad that can be harmful advice. When you say act your wage, right? Which is
Right.
more of, hey, because I'm only paid so much, I'm just going to work much less.
Right.
Well, like, yeah, you can, but why? I mean, it's like you're shooting yourself in the foot. So, all right, so now you're just going to be unproductive and just be annoying and not really do the work. And then your coworkers are going to have to pick up the slack, and then they're kind of angry at you. So it's like, really, just do your job. And if you're not happy, look for another job.
Yeah,
So
well,
things like
I can
wage.
see.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I can see where. Yeah, and that's true. And I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm gonna let you get
mm,
out for this one other thing here.
sure.
You wrote this article about AI and skilled workers, the new hot and in demand professionals, and I think that you kind of gave your take on it already. But do you think that AI is still kind of it is we're a long way from really developing for it to really be a true game changer in the job search market. Would you think?
I think ultimately, depending on the cost of this, because as we talked about earlier, like there's a lot of costs involved and they're not recouping it yet. So I don't know
Hmm.
how that's going to play out. But I do feel, give you an example. I was watching a lot of these Y Combinator young people. Y
Uh-huh.
Combinator is like a very elite, you know, uh, entity where they'll get usually these young guys and women who are really super smart technologists who are coming up with these really cool startups. And
Hmm.
most of them all are using AI now. So
Hmm.
are all of them going to be a success? No. But out of, let's say there are 100, I'm making up a number, the odds are there might be two or three that just come up with the right idea using AI the right way, and that they become the new Facebooks and the new,
Right.
you know,
Right.
new Amazons and all that. So I think it's going to work, but not work for everybody for everything. And that's just how things go. Like not everyone's going to be a millionaire or billionaire. So some
Right.
people just get it lucky and get the right thing at the right time and it works. Others not so much.
Yeah.
Um,
Agreed.
and it'll be really interesting to see how it all plays out. It's be exciting.
Hmm. Yeah. I agree. There's limitations to everything as we talk about, and the one who's smarter in using it is a tool.
Mhm,
They're going to win more jobs and more opportunities.
mhm.
So very good. Thank you very much, Jack, for
All right.
coming on the show again. It's Thriving in Chaos: How to Be Super Successful, Wealthy, and Happy in this world. That says it. Uh,
It's great seeing
and
you again, my friend.
yes,
So
good to see you.
so you're gonna be coming back to New York, New Jersey anytime soon?
I might be coming back
Yeah.
for one more trip. I was just
Awesome.
there
Oh, really?
a couple of weeks ago, but it was truly in and out.
Yeah.
I was really literally on the plane Thursday morning and heading back Friday morning, only to
Mm.
find out that I might be. I'm trying to get around it, but Lord knows. We'll see what happens.
All right, hopefully everything goes
Whew.
well.
Yeah, I hope it too. And if I can create some time, we can do a lunch or
All
a
right,
dinner or
sounds good,
something.
man.
That'd be
Excellent.
great. For the rest of you, thank you very much for joining the Voice of JobSeekers.com. This is going to be in the podcast feed probably next Tuesday
Awesome.
morning. So
Oh,
look
cool, man.
forward to it. See the rest of you all later. Uh,
Awesome.
all right.
All
Take
right, take
care,
care, buddy.
Jack.
All
And
right, good
for
to
the
see you
rest of
again.
you, yeah, you too.
All right,
And
bye-bye.
for the rest of